The town of Willow Creek was quiet, but not as quiet as Ethan Cole. For 15 long years, he hadn't spoken a single word. People said he lost his voice after the car crash that took his parents. He was only 6 then, small and scared, sitting on the side of the road when the police found him. Since that night, Ethan had lived with his Aunt Margaret, a kind woman who always believed one day he would talk again. But that day never came. Every morning, Ethan walked to his small workshop near the edge of town. He fixed broken pianos and music boxes for people. He never charged much. He just liked to hear the sound of soft music even if he never said a thing. He was tall now, quiet but gentle. The people of Willow Creek had grown used to his silence. They stopped asking questions. They stopped expecting anything. Until Lila Parker moved in next door. Lila was the kind of girl who filled silence with laughter. She played the violin in the open air, even when no one was watching. She had just moved from New York, and the quiet little town felt strange to her. On her first morning, she saw Ethan sitting by his porch, repairing an old piano key. He didn't look up. She smiled and waved, but he didn't respond. Later that day, she asked her neighbor about him. Ethan, the woman said. He doesn't talk. Hasn't said a word in 15 years. Lost his parents in that crash. Lila felt a chill. Not even one word. Not one, the woman replied. That night, Lila stood by her window, playing her violin softly. The melody was slow, gentle, almost sad. She didn't know why she played it, but something about that silent boy made her heart ache. And though she didn't see it, Ethan stopped working when he heard the sound. He closed his eyes. For the first time in years, he felt something, a memory of his mother's lullaby, faint and broken. Days passed. Every morning, Lila tried to talk to him. Hi, Ethan. Beautiful day, isn't it? I like your workshop. He never replied. Not even a nod. But she kept trying. One afternoon, Lila walked up to his porch and placed a small note beside him before walking away. It said, "You don't have to talk. I'll listen anyway." The next morning, when she stepped outside, she found the same note on her porch with new words written under hers. I hear you. Her heart skipped a beat. He had written something. It wasn't much, but it was the first time Ethan had replied to anyone in 15 years. Lila began leaving notes every day. She'd ask him small things: what kind of music he liked, what his favorite color was, what made him smile. Sometimes, he answered with a word. Sometimes, he didn't. But slowly, something changed. He started looking at her when she played her violin. He started smiling just a little. For the first time, Ethan felt the walls around his silence breaking. Then came the night of the storm. Rain poured over Willow Creek like never before. The thunder shook windows, and lightning flashed across the sky. Ethan sat inside, trying to finish repairing a broken music box. But through the sound of the rain, he heard something faint, far away. A violin. It was Lila. She was outside, playing under the rain. The melody was wild, full of feeling, like she was calling someone. Ethan stood by the window, heart pounding. The sound grew sharper, stranger. It wasn't just music now. It was like a voice crying, begging. Then suddenly, the sound stopped. Silence. Ethan's chest tightened. He ran out into the rain, calling her name in his head. Lila, where are you? He searched the street, the yard, the porch. The violin lay on the ground, one string broken, water dripping from its wooden frame. Something inside him cracked. He fell to his knees, picked up the violin, and whispered for the first time in 15 years. Lila. The sound tore through the storm like thunder. Windows rattled. Lights flickered. The rain seemed to freeze for a moment. And then silence again. The next morning, people found Ethan sitting on his porch, soaked to the bone, still holding the violin. He didn't move. He didn't speak again. Lila was gone. No one knew where she went. The police searched everywhere, the woods, the river, the hills, but there was no sign of her. All they found was a note hidden inside the violin case. The ink was wet and smeared, but 3 words were still clear. He can hear. No one understood what it meant. But Ethan did. And as he sat alone, staring at the broken violin, he knew his silence had been keeping something away, something that was awake now. The news spread fast. Lila Parker had vanished. The police said she must have run away during the storm. But Ethan Cole knew that wasn't true. He had heard her. He had called her name, and something had answered back, something that didn't sound human. Now, the only sound in his small house was the ticking of an old clock and the faint hum of the broken violin that lay beside him. Every time he looked at it, he felt the same cold whisper crawl through his mind. He can hear. He didn't know what it meant, but those 3 words haunted him. Days passed. Search teams combed the woods, the river, and every corner of Willow Creek. No one found a single clue. But Ethan couldn't stop thinking about the night of the storm, about how the rain had frozen when he shouted her name. About how the air had listened. Something had happened that night. Something impossible. One evening, Ethan walked back to the old bridge at the edge of town, the place where Lila used to play her violin. The storm had left deep marks there. Trees were broken, and the earth looked torn apart. He stood there in silence, the wind whispering through the leaves. Then he heard its soft, distant music. It was the same melody Lila used to play. Ethan turned sharply. The sound came from the woods beyond the bridge. His heart pounded. He stepped forward slowly, branches snapping under his feet. The deeper he went, the colder it became. The trees stood too still, like they were listening. Then, in the darkness, he saw something shining, a small piece of metal stuck in the mud. He picked it up. It was a violin string. His hands trembled. He followed the faint sound again, but it wasn't just music anymore. It was a voice. A soft, broken whisper calling his name. Ethan. He froze. The sound came from behind him. He turned, nothing. Again, the whisper. Ethan, help me. His throat went dry. His lips parted, but no words came out. The air felt heavy, pressing against him. He wanted to run, but his legs wouldn't move. Then the whisper changed, deeper now, not Lila's voice anymore. You called her. You broke the silence. Ethan stumbled backward, his breath shaking. He couldn't see where the voice came from. The shadows moved like smoke. Where is she? He whispered, his voice trembling. The air itself seemed to answer. Below. And then silence again. Ethan ran home, shaking, his clothes muddy and his mind spinning. He tried to write down everything, the violin string, the voice, the strange words. But the moment he began writing, his lights flickered. He looked up, the mirror across the room trembled. His reflection blinked, even though he hadn't. Ethan stepped closer. In the mirror, behind his reflection, stood a figure, a girl with wet hair, her dress torn, her eyes wide and hollow. Lila, he whispered. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. She lifted a trembling hand and pointed to the violin on his table. Then her reflection began to fade like mist. Ethan ran to the table. The violin was glowing faintly, soft white light pulsing from inside it. He opened the case and inside was another note, written in shaky handwriting. Don't speak again. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He sat by the window, staring at the sky. His head felt heavy, filled with whispers that weren't his. He began hearing things, small sounds, soft voices. Sometimes, it was Lila's laugh. Sometimes, it was the voice from the woods. He covered his ears, but it didn't stop. At 3 a.m., the violin began to play by itself. The strings moved, though no one touched them. The same sad tune filled the room, slow and haunting. Ethan whispered, "Lila, is that you?" The music stopped. Then, a soft female voice spoke from the dark corner of the room. "Ethan, you shouldn't have called me." He turned, but there was no one there. He picked up the violin. The wood was ice cold. He could feel her presence not beside him, but inside the violin. Like her soul was trapped within. He wanted to speak again, to say her name. But the note's warning echoed in his mind. "Don't speak again." The next morning, people in town began whispering strange things. They said when Ethan shouted Lila's name that night, the lights in every house flickered. Some said they heard voices in the storm, others swore they saw two shadows walking on the bridge. No one knew what really happened. But Ethan did. He knew something had changed inside him. His silence had been keeping something asleep, and now, it was awake. That evening, Ethan went back to the bridge one last time. He carried the violin in his hands. He stood at the edge, staring at the dark water below. The wind grew colder. He could hear whispers again, hundreds of them now, soft and distant. They sounded like her. He whispered just one word. "Please." The air around him froze. His breath came out white. And then, from the water below, a faint voice rose up. "He can speak again." The reflection on the surface of the river changed. His face wasn't alone anymore. Lila stood beside him, her eyes full of tears, but her lips curved into a sad smile. Then the reflection shattered and the water went still. For 2 days, Ethan Cole didn't leave his house. He sat by the window, staring at Lila's violin, afraid to touch it, afraid to even breathe too loud. Every time he looked at it, he heard her voice again. Sometimes soft, sometimes crying, sometimes angry. He didn't know if he was going mad, or if she was really there. But deep down, something told him the truth. She was calling him. Only he could hear her. And only he could answer. The town of Willow Creek was no longer quiet. People whispered that strange things had begun to happen. Streetlights flickered without power, mirrors cracked for no reason, and animals refused to go near Ethan's workshop. Even Aunt Margaret noticed the change. "Ethan, sweetheart," she said one morning, her voice full of worry, "you haven't been sleeping. Maybe you need help, a doctor, someone to talk to." Ethan tried to smile, but the truth was written all over his tired face. His eyes were dark, his hands shaking. He wrote on a piece of paper. "I hear her." Margaret frowned. "Who?" He hesitated, then wrote one word. "Lila." Her face went pale. "Ethan, Lila's gone." He nodded slowly, but in his heart, he knew she wasn't. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep again. The whispers grew louder. They filled the room like wind, circling him. He pressed his hands to his ears, but it didn't help. The voice came from inside his head. "You called me, Ethan, you woke me up." He looked around the dark room. "Lila," he whispered. "No," the voice said, soft but cold. "She's with me." Ethan froze. "Who are you?" The voice didn't answer. Instead, the violin on his desk began to play by itself. A slow, trembling tune. As it played, shadows on the wall began to move. Then, without realizing it, Ethan spoke again, his second word in 15 years. "Stop." The violin exploded into pieces. Every window in the house shattered. The lights flickered wildly, and the floor trembled beneath him. And just like that silence, Ethan stood still, shaking, his throat burning. He had barely said the word, but it felt like something powerful had passed through him, something not human. The next morning, Margaret found him sitting among the broken glass, his hands covered in dust. She gasped. "Ethan. What happened?" He didn't answer. He simply pointed to the words he had written on the wall in black charcoal. "My voice isn't mine." Margaret didn't understand. But she could feel it too. The air inside the house felt wrong, heavy, like something unseen was watching them. That afternoon, Ethan walked to the old church on the hill. It was empty now, long abandoned. He sat at the back, his head low. He wanted to pray, but he couldn't find the words. Then, as he closed his eyes, he heard the same soft tune, the one Lila used to play. He turned around. In the middle of the church stood Lila. Her hair was wet, her eyes pale like moonlight. She smiled faintly. "Ethan," she whispered. "You shouldn't have called me." He took a step closer. "Lila." But before he could speak again, her voice echoed twice. Once from her lips, and once from his own mouth. He froze. It was his voice but not his words. She stared at him sadly. "You have my voice now." Ethan's heart stopped. What do you mean?" "When you broke the silence," she said softly, "you took it. My soul, my sound, my music, it's all inside you now." Ethan shook his head. "I don't want it. I just want you back." She smiled but tears rolled down her face. "You can't. Every time you speak, you use part of me. Every word you say takes me further away." Her voice trembled. "Please, Ethan, stop talking." Suddenly, the church bell rang by itself. The sound was deafening, shaking the old wooden walls. Lila turned to the door, her figure flickering like smoke. "He's coming," she whispered. "Who?" Ethan shouted. She looked back at him with fear in her eyes. "The voice you woke up. It's not yours, it's his." The candles went out all at once. Darkness swallowed the room. Ethan reached for her, but she was already fading. The last thing he heard before she vanished was her whisper, weak, almost gone. "Don't speak again, or he will hear you." Ethan fell to his knees, his heart pounding. He could still feel her voice inside him, faint, trembling, like a heartbeat that wasn't his. He tried to speak, but no sound came out. His throat burned. The walls of the church creaked, and the sound of footsteps echoed in the dark. Someone or something was there. A deep, cold voice whispered from behind him. "You borrowed what was mine." Ethan turned, his breath shaking. "Who are you?" The shadow stepped closer, tall and shapeless. "I am the silence you broke." The floor cracked beneath him, light flashing through the cracks like lightning. Ethan tried to stand, but the air felt thick and alive. "Your words," the voice said, "belong to me now." And then everything went still. The next morning, the church stood empty again. But on the altar, carved into the wood, were 4 words burned deep into the surface. "He has the voice." Ethan was gone. Only the echo of his whisper remained, fading slowly into the wind. When Ethan Cole opened his eyes, everything was quiet. Too quiet. He was lying on the floor of the old church, sunlight breaking through broken glass windows. His head hurt, his throat dry. He sat up slowly. The place was empty. The marks on the walls were gone, even the burned words "he has the voice" had vanished. For a moment, Ethan wondered if it had all been a dream. But then he heard it again, that faint, soft hum inside his chest. It sounded like Lila's violin, playing from somewhere deep inside him. He whispered her name, barely moving his lips. "Lila." The air shimmered, like heat over fire. For a split second, he saw her standing at the end of the church, pale, silent, watching him. Then she was gone. That night, Ethan returned home. The town looked strange now. People avoided him. Children crossed the street when they saw him coming. Windows closed when he passed by. Something about him had changed, not just his silence, but his presence. The air around him felt heavy, like a storm waiting to break. When he entered his house, the violin was on the table again, whole, not broken anymore. It shouldn't have been possible. He touched it carefully. The moment his fingers brushed the strings, a whisper filled his mind. "You gave your voice away once, Ethan. Do you remember?" He froze. His heart started to race. Gave it away? That night, he dreamed. He saw himself as a child sitting in the back seat of his parents' car on a rainy night. His mother was humming softly. His father smiled through the rear-view mirror. Then the crash. Screaming metal, breaking glass, fire. He remembered crawling from the wreck, crying, calling for his mother. But when she didn't answer, he screamed her name again and again until everything around him started to shake. The ground split open, and a shadow reached out from the darkness. It spoke in a voice deeper than thunder. "You called me. I will answer." Terrified, young Ethan shouted, "Take my voice. Take it. Just bring them back." And the shadow smiled. When he woke the next morning, his parents were gone and so was his voice. Ethan woke from the memory gasping for air. His hands shook. Tears burned his eyes. He finally understood. He hadn't lost his voice that day, he had given it away. That was why he had lived in silence for 15 years. That was why the shadow had waited for him to speak again. When he broke that silence, he hadn't just called Lila. He had called it. Ethan looked at the violin again. It glowed faintly, the light pulsing like a heartbeat. "Lila," he whispered, "I'm so sorry." The air turned cold. Frost began to form on the windows. From the violin came her soft voice, weak and fading. "You didn't bring me back, Ethan. You brought him back." Ethan's breath caught. "How do I fix this?" Her voice trembled. "You can't. Unless, you silence yourself again." He frowned. "What do you mean?" "Your voice is his door. If you speak, he grows stronger. If you stop, he fades." Ethan's eyes filled with tears. "But if I stop speaking, you'll disappear too, won't you?" "Yes," she whispered softly. "Because I am part of you now. Part of your voice." He felt his heart break. He had waited 15 years to speak again, only to learn that his silence had protected everyone, including her. The ground trembled. The lights flickered. Ethan turned toward the window. Across the street, he saw a dark shape moving, tall, shifting, made of shadow and smoke. The same one from his dream. It stood under the streetlight, faceless, but somehow staring right at him. Then, it spoke not out loud, but inside his head. "Your voice belongs to me, Ethan. You cannot hide it again." He shouted, "Leave me alone." The sound blasted through the room. The window shattered. The violin flew into the air and crashed to the ground. When he looked again, the shadow was gone, but the violin was cracked open, glowing from within. Inside it, something dark moved like black smoke. Lila's voice whispered, weak and broken. "You must end this. Go back to where it began." Ethan knew what she meant, the bridge. The same bridge where she had played her last song. He took the violin and walked through the night. The streets were empty, the moon covered by clouds. Every step echoed in silence. When he reached the bridge, the wind howled, and the river below churned like a storm. The same voice from before echoed around him, deep and cold. "Speak my name, and I will be free." Ethan shook his head. "No." The shadow formed on the other side of the bridge. "Then she will die inside you." He could hear Lila crying inside his mind. He looked down at the violin, cracked and glowing. "I won't let either of you win," he said softly. "You took my voice once. You won't take it again." He held the violin over the river. "Goodbye, Lila," he whispered. And with tears falling, he dropped it into the dark water below. A scream filled the night, half hers, half his, echoing through the valley. The sky flashed white, then went silent. Ethan fell to his knees, gasping, his throat burning. The shadow vanished, swallowed by the wind. When he opened his mouth to speak, no sound came out. His voice was gone again. But in the distance, faintly, he heard the sound of a violin playing one last gentle song. The town of Willow Creek woke to a strange calm. The air was still. The sky was pale. And by the old bridge, Ethan Cole sat in silence. He hadn't spoken since the night before, when he threw Lila's violin into the river and ended everything. His voice was gone again, and the world felt quiet, too quiet, like it was holding its breath. People found him sitting there at dawn, wet and pale, staring at the water. When they called to him, he didn't answer. He just looked at them with tired eyes that had seen too much. They didn't know that beneath that calm river, something had changed. That night, Ethan returned home. The power was out again. The world outside looked frozen, no wind, no birds, no sound at all. He walked inside, lit a candle, and sat by the window. His throat hurt, his mind empty. He wrote in his old notebook, "It's over." But deep down, he knew it wasn't. Because silence had never truly ended anything. It had only delayed it. As the candle flickered, he felt something, a soft vibration on the table. He looked down. The old radio that hadn't worked in years turned on by itself. Static. Then, through the static, a voice. "Ethan." He froze. He knew that voice. "Ethan, can you hear me?" It was Lila. He leaned closer, trembling. "Lila." No sound came from his mouth, he had no voice, but the radio answered anyway, as if it could hear his thoughts. "You stopped him, Ethan. But he's not gone. He's inside you now." Ethan's heart raced. He wrote on the notebook, "How do I stop it?" The voice replied softly. "You can't stop it, you can only speak it out." He frowned, confused. "Speak it out?" "The power inside you," Lila whispered, "the voice you gave away, it's still yours. You can use it one last time. But it will cost you everything." Ethan closed his eyes. His hands shook. He didn't want more power. He only wanted peace. He wanted her back. "Please, Ethan," she said, her voice cracking through the static. "Do it before it wakes again. End this, for me." Then the radio went silent. Ethan sat still for a long time. Then he stood and walked outside. The town was asleep, the streets empty. He followed the same path back to the bridge. The moonlight shone over the water, calm and cold. He looked down at his reflection. For a moment, it was just him. Then another face appeared beside his, Lila's. She smiled gently, her eyes sad. "You kept your promise," her voice whispered in his mind. He knelt at the edge, tears falling silently. He wanted to say so many things, how much he missed her, how sorry he was, but no words came. Then the water rippled, and her voice changed, deeper now, darker. "Speak, Ethan," it said. "Let it out." He shook his head, terrified. "No," he mouthed. But the river began to rise. The ground trembled. The air thickened with energy. The silence itself felt alive. The voice inside him, the one that wasn't his, began to whisper. "Speak my name, or the world will break in silence." Ethan fell to his knees, clutching his chest. His heartbeat thundered like drums. He felt it, the shadow he had tried to bury, clawing its way out. He knew then that if he stayed silent, the darkness would consume everything. If he spoke, the world might end, but maybe, just maybe, he could free her. He looked at the sky, whispering in his mind, I love you, Lila. A tear rolled down his cheek. He opened his mouth. His voice rusty, deep, and full of power came out like thunder. I love you. The moment he said it, light burst from his chest, bright and blinding. The ground split, the river exploded upward, and the entire valley filled with sound waves of energy rolling through the air. Buildings shook, trees bent, and the stars above flickered as if the heavens themselves were listening. For the first time in 15 years, the world truly heard Ethan's voice. And it wasn't just sound. It was every emotion he had ever hidden: grief, love, loss, hope, all at once. When the light faded, the bridge was gone. The water was calm again. And Ethan Cole had vanished. At dawn, people found the place silent, peaceful. The sun rose over the valley, and from far away, faint music floated in the air. A violin. The same song Lila used to play. They said they could hear two voices in the melody, one of a girl, one of a man, together, soft, eternal. And on the stone near the river, carved by hand, were 5 simple words. He spoke. We were saved. In Willow Creek, people still tell his story. The boy who lived in silence for 15 years. The boy whose first words broke the world and then rebuilt it. They say when the wind blows just right at night, you can still hear that violin. And if you listen close enough, you'll hear a whisper too. I love you.